Skilled Carer is here to provide more than just care. We support families, participants, support workers, care teams and the community to understand disability, reduce stigma, grow capacity, promote happiness and achieve dreams. I started Skilled Carer to provide sustainable growth, trust, integrity and education to the industry. We do this by employing reliable and responsible support workers with high integrity and moral fibre. We educate and support them within the industry, and we liaise with families to find sustainable solutions to their lives and facilitate their needs. Our goal is to enable each person we support to live the life they choose. We facilitate our clients' goals, which may be to rejoin the workforce, get and hold a job or career, master everyday tasks, gain ownership and independence, or access community services, as well as anything else they need and are searching for. We provide education through the zones of regulation to help the individual learn and understand their emotions, recognise others, and implement strategies to help them regulate their emotions and reduce behaviours. For this podcast, I'm going to use the acronym ID for intellectual disability, and that refers to combinations of autism and ADHD in context with intellectual disability at times. The premise is to discuss some of the ways that we can help the individual, as well as the responsibility that we hold in this position as a support worker within a person's life. So with ID, there can be a lack of deferred gratification. And that's, the conflict between allowing an individual to be honest and make their own choices, as well as guiding them, in a world where there's behaviors and where instant gratification are in abundance, opportunities of food, pornography, social media, caffeine, gambling, alcohol, drugs. How do you guide someone to make the right choices and yet not tell them what to do, and not tell them what they should want? They can we all lack the self-restraint because we may not have the ability to understand the long-term effects or choose not to acknowledge them, but particularly because of an ID or impulse from ADHD or trying to escape and release the anxieties of the pressures built up from the modern world, and trying to fit that in the context of different social situations. Gratification seeking is the only strategy that some see in front of them sometimes. That's where a support worker is vital. Outsiders or those that don't understand the needs of an individual might fail to see where the impact that you can have. So how do we do this? How do we make the positive changes when self-gratification is there even when we're not there as support workers? You can do it by scaffolding or, constructing processes that are replicable under different contexts. And to do that requires repetition, particularly for ID. Repetition is imperative. It allows the person to strengthen those pathways in the mind that prioritize long-term benefits. I think we need to discuss as a community the moral and ethical issues behind the dialogue we have with participants, because we're in a place in their lives where we do have and can take a lot of control over their decision making. We're in homes. We're a critical part of this process, on a macro and a micro level. But our aims should not be to control the individual and their choices, but rather enable them to develop their decision-making ability and enhance their ability to cultivate better lives and outcomes as a result, of this really challenging opportunity. The policy makers and the content makers, particularly through the NDIS, if you watch the educational videos around it, they don't give you answers to these questions, and they probably leave you with more questions and more grey areas that have left you scratching your head. And I'm not suggesting it's necessarily their fault, but I do think this is where having people who have worked in the industry and have undergone series of professional development and worked with families and individuals to achieve outcomes have much more of an influence, on an individual and their success than someone coming in from another industry or jumping onto the NDIS as an opportunity, or as a young person doing support work who doesn't have the guidance, but is certainly capable of making these positive changes. But this is where choosing your provider, you're not going to see some of that detailed information on an individual sole trader Facebook post or even on a provider's website. You're really trusting the person who's in charge and who is working with the individual and your loved one, or the person that you have guardianship over. And some of that might be confronting to hear. We're here to solve and discuss the real issues facing families and individuals. And I won't take a backward step in tackling the heart of the needs of the individual. And the fact, in fact, we welcome the challenge. And that's why we're able to call ourselves skilled carer. We've been doing it and have done it for over 10 years. And we aren't coming over from other industries. Although some supports are new to the industry, they have resources and guidance on hand in a selfless and giving way that enables success. Certainly all industries benefit from outside skill sets and a different perspective. So I'm not trying to lack appreciation or confuse the listener, but I think disability is an industry where knowledge and experience enhances the ability to show compassion, care, and understanding, and that cultivates positive relationships. The NDIS has provided opportunities for a lot of short-term accommodation and supported independent living investors to buy up locations as they see a high yield and opportunities for wealth and income. But, do they understand the needs of the individual? Our biases and the way we make decisions and take risks are hardwired into us from our biology. The millions of years that humans have, this thing called risk and loss aversion, where those who took less risk were more likely to survive throughout history and therefore pass on those genetics and that predisposition to make those types of choices. So let's discuss a couple of points about that. The way we react to uncertainty, it's a combination of feeling stress, when we experience uncertainty, and pleasure when it's resolved, makes our need for certainty a primary human motive that drives large acts of our behavior. Most of the time, we're unaware of it, and we don't realize that our drive to seek certainty is underpinning our behavior. It all happens subconsciously, which has the advantage of speeding up the process. You didn't think when the bush rustled, you just ran, giving you a head start on that fast predator. That made a lot of sense for our biology. But in the modern world, many of those subconscious reactions, they're not rational and they're not helpful. So today there's really tigers hiding in our hedges, but we still react as if there are, because our brains don't distinguish between real tigers and imaginary ones. So today our fight or flight response is triggered by, work deadlines or our daily commute or someone in traffic. When you combine that with the young person in a classroom with an intellectual disability or ADHD or autism or some type of learning disability, and there's a negative correlation with putting your hand up, taking a risk to learn, and whether that results in a response from a teacher who doesn't understand the individual's needs or the bullying that's associated with being different, then An association is created between taking those risks in a classroom and a fight, flight, or freeze response due to the uncertainty that's created in that situation. It goes against our biology and our nature over millennia. It's an uphill challenge to want to take risks for that individual. And the risk versus reward there isn't great, especially when we know that we feel negative emotion towards loss and pain up to 3 times as much as we feel a positive experience to pleasure or gain. So the risk versus reward, there's no payoff. These individuals become more protective over conserving what they have and keeping those poker chips close to their chest versus risking them and going all in and putting some on the table by putting their hand up and taking a risk of potentially getting it wrong and losing that hand when they're already playing a game where the chips are down and they're the underdog. There's a good reasons why we have these brains and why we had them in ancient history. And now that we're in a position of abundance and we can see shortcuts, that we can take without having that improved decision making, it affects our choices. And whether it's a decision like, do you have that extra hit of caffeine, or do you play a video game, or do you eat that extra tasty snack? Our brains want to feel that outcome of pleasure. And that's because we wanted it and needed the berries that we found in the forest. So we collected them all and we ate them all because we didn't know when the next one was coming. And yet, now you can go down to 7-Eleven, buy a Slurpee and an energy drink that on the way home, get home, open the fridge, and see what else is next. What other tasty snack is going to give and fill that desire of my brain? Because we don't understand and can't conceptualize the negative impact long-term these small seconds of the day decisions have. Our paths are forged and our lives often decided by 40 to 50% of the actions of our day that are formed by habits or automatic choices that shape minutes or hours of our lives at first and then years of our lives later. Decisive moments are choices and small forks in the road that can determine a good or bad day. If you master the art of showing up to those moments, that's when we can influence impact as an individual, as a support worker. So knowing behavioral psychology and imparting the wisdom of habit creating in a tangible manner. And this is why I choose to reward the effort, not the outcome. Reward the risks taken. You put your hand up. You took a risk to choose a healthy meal to eat instead of an unhealthy meal. Build that decision up with praise rather than saying, oh, you only ate half that healthy meal. That's not good enough. Don't focus on the outcome, focus on the effort. That's where the changing behavior was. That's where we can take a positive look and build and facilitate positive habits over time that compound. And that's where enormous influence can be had by a skilled professional and someone with behavioral, psychological understanding of the individual. Educating this stuff behind, the education behind this stuff is difficult, but the concept is simple. Reward the effort, not the outcome. We are passionate about the support that we produce, and we spend our time, energy, and emotions on work in this industry. And when you hear some of the unfortunate examples of what's happening, it does feel like it degrades the industry as a whole. And so I'd like to leave you with a thought, and it's from a mental model that garners the way I try to approach life. The quote is, never attribute to malice to that which can be adequately explained by carelessness, disorganization, and forgetfulness. Thanks again for taking the time to listen. Stay tuned for further episodes released weekly. If you want to get in touch with me or a support worker from Skilled Carer, please contact us at skilledcarer@gmail.com. Check the website, www.skilledcarer.com, or leave a voice note here. We are always keen on chatting with people about opportunities and learning how we can support you and your family to make your life easier.